Last week, we had James Fernandez on from Carrington West, and this week we've got his HR manager, Emily Christmas. Looking at the interplay between the person who founded and runs the company and the person whose job it is to look after this on a day-to-day basis, I think makes for a great episode. Emily studied this area an awful lot, and so her insights are particularly valuable. Hello, welcome back to Wotter Future. Today we're joined by Emily Christmas. Emily is the HR manager of Carrington West. You may remember that recently we've had James Fernandez on, also from Carrington West. But Emily's been there for 3.5 years. Prior to that, she's worked in HR in other recruitment industry roles. What's really interesting, though, about Emily is what she's been studying. She's got a master's in multi-generational motivation. She's done a thesis in millennial motivation and sales environments, and prior to that, she studied goal-setting theory. So I think this should set us up for a really interesting conversation today, Emily. I'm so grateful you can join us. Thanks a lot.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Let's jump straight in. What is the biggest issue affecting the world of work right now?
That's such a big question, and I've actually been thinking about this a lot. It's quite hard to kind of define it down to one thing. So I think, generally speaking, the biggest issue is around the sort of ever-changing picture of employment, ever-changing demands of employees, candidates, and people in general. I think that's changing very rapidly all the time. Obviously, the last few years has been very different, obviously mentioning the big C words. COVID obviously has had a big impact on things, and I do just think that the world of work is changing very quickly all the time. And I think an issue that organisations will face is keeping up with that demand. So really sort of staying ahead of the curve, making sure that they're really understanding what their people want from the workplace, what they want from their employer for their careers, and the importance of things like work-life balance. That's all very much, I feel, changing a lot, and it seems to be changing all the time.
So, I think what's interesting here is coming back to your sort of masters and your understanding of sort of differences in motivation between the generations. Is this a sort of change? I mean, obviously it's all kind of passage of time stuff, but what's the biggest thing that's happening at the moment? Is it that COVID upended everything, or is it actually just more younger people with different aspirations, different motivations that are coming through? I.e., was this change inevitable, or was it caused by the global pandemic?
I think it's probably a real mixture of both. I do think the sort of impact of lockdown and, being forced back into your house and not really being able to go out, and has really meant that people have started to value sort of that work-life balance even more so, I feel, than they did necessarily beforehand. People aren't so keen to do a 2-hour train journey to work anymore because they've seen what it's like without having to do that. So sort of understandably so, that has changed things in that respect. And I guess that's maybe more sort of experienced people who for years have been doing that commute and going into the office every day have kind of seen the other side of things where they haven't had to do that, and all the benefits that's kind of given to them and their personal life as well. Maybe their well-being, they've really found that it's benefited that. So I think on that side of the penny, there's definitely COVID related, or sort of lockdown related. But I do definitely think that we do have a new generation coming into the workforce who have different expectations. And again, that may well have been affected by the lockdowns, because that's really massively impacted education. So people having homeschooling, people who've maybe missed out on that university experience that people like you and I have experienced, they may not have had that, so therefore they have different expectations in the workplace now too. So I think it's probably maybe a mixture of both things really. I think it's definitely been sort of exaggerated or amplified by what we've all been through over the last few years.
So maybe this is the sort of catalyst of the underlying change. I mean, I think intergenerational differences and divides are certainly nothing new, are they? Back in this, you have to look at the 60s to know that this has happened before. But I do find it very interesting when I speak to sort of business owners who are generally speaking are sort of slightly older sort of generation. they often talk about kind of how different millennials and Gen Zs are. Without necessarily, what they normally say is, I've got no idea what they want. And this is, a sort of very interesting sort of divide in the workplace. What's your sort of take on that? Where do we need to be looking to try and find solutions in this area?
Yeah, so looking at sort of the differences that I found sort of doing my research, but also I'm quite heavily involved in the sort of talent acquisition for Carrington West as well. So I see it a lot. Over the years, I've seen this sort of change in things that people are looking for and what they're motivated by in terms of a career and in work. I think, obviously, as a recruitment company, we're largely salespeople. And I guess traditionally, scientifically, you'd think that salespeople are, purely driven by earning money, bonuses, commission, that kind of thing, performance-related pay. And that very much is the case with sort of the more experienced people we have, sort of those older generations, if you like, so Gen X and definitely millennials too. And then what I found in my research, and like I said, I'm starting to see more speaking to candidates, employees, is that money, yes, it's still important. Obviously, cost of living, money's very important, and it's sort of a hygiene factor, if you like, in terms of motivation. But there's definitely things that are becoming more important now. So things like diversity and inclusion in the workplace, work-life balance. That's something I've really noticed is that young people are valuing that a lot more than I've seen before. But also things like social impact and CSR. Sort of earlier on in my career, it wasn't really things that people mentioned sort of when they were looking into companies. It wasn't really of importance, but more and more often people are seeing what we do on our website and they're mentioning that as one of the reasons that they want to come work for us. They like our charity policy, they like that we partner with the university and various local charities, and for that stood out to them. Which is quite new to me. Again, it's not something that I've ever really experienced before. So whether that is a generational change, is it an impact of what's happened in the last few years? People have seen the importance of community, I think more than ever when we were all locked down. I think there was a real sort of sense of community, and maybe that's why it's become more important. But there's definitely sort of that sort of subtle shift in what people are looking for and what they want. That certainly came out through my research, and actually, like I said, anecdotally in the job role too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's just reminded me of something over the pandemic, which I'd kind of not thought about for a while, which is that, early on in the pandemic, there was a lot of likening to World War II and needing to be in it together and the Churchillian speeches and all that kind of stuff. But actually, all the way through, just even the idea of kind of, social distancing for the kind of greater good, I found myself thinking, I think a lot of people started thinking about things from other people's perspective, and you start to think, oh God, what if they're vulnerable, or what if someone that they're with is vulnerable? And so this community kind of appeared, or this sort of sense of unity between people that you didn't know. And I think, if that has ticked over into the workplace and that people are kind of wanting that a little bit more, I think that's very, very interesting. I mean, obviously we would kind of branch this term under kind of employer branding, wouldn't we? Normally. So it's interesting that you've seen the rise there. What's the biggest thing, do you think, if you could pinpoint one thing that people are looking for from the kind of outside before they've really interacted and really understood? What's the kind of headline, I suppose, that they're looking for? I
would say a good culture. And obviously good culture means different things to different people. So for someone might look at our culture and say, I love the fact that you focus so much on learning and development. Some people might say, I really like the fact that you're a very social company, and I like to collaborate with people. I want to be friends with the people I work with. Whereas others, it's the charity side of things, or the community work. The word culture is something I hear a lot. And they want to be surrounded by like-minded people. They want to be sort of brought up with people around them, if that makes sense. But yeah, like I said, culture does mean different things to different candidates. I think that's something as well that potentially we're seeing that candidates are more sort of diverse in that respect as well, in terms of what they look for. I think, traditionally, if someone's going for a sales shop, I want to know how much money I can make. I want to know how much commission I can earn. Whereas now there's much more things, like I said, things like learning and development, opportunities develop skills, to progress in the business, what's available in that respect, what are the people like, what's it like to actually be in the office. I get asked these questions a lot. So I think, that people are looking for a really good working environment.
Interesting, and I think it's very important what you sort of mentioned there, that it's this is different for different people. We have a similar focus on this end on sort of learning development, and I always I mentioned this when I was speaking to James last time out, but I always tell people this is going to be a really difficult place to work. It's compared to most places you've been, this is going to be really hard. And the main reason is I'm never going to stop throwing more things for you to learn.
Yeah.
Like that's either you love that or you hate that, and I always. I've said on a podcast a long time ago, actually, that I tell people we've got a learning and development budget and that we'll buy people books or courses or whatever. If their eyes don't light up at that moment, I would largely consider the interview over.
Yeah.
And I think, what I find interesting is that I've also then spoken to other people who've said, oh my God, working for you sounds like the worst thing ever. I don't want to do it. And that's interesting that some people just want the to not be sort of challenged in that way. The work isn't their priority. Their priority is everything else, and so they don't want something to come and kind of force its way into their life and get in the way of things. Is that something that you find that some people, I suppose maybe they don't talk to you in the first place, so that
maybe that is the case. Yeah, because I do find that people do apply and approach us because they really like our approach to people, essentially. So we often talk about our people first approach. That's sort of the language that we use on website, things like LinkedIn, social media, and people will often use that terminology back to me. So I think probably if people weren't sort of looking for a company that provide these kind of opportunities, they probably wouldn't approach us. We're quite loud about what we do. Obviously, we've had plenty of award wins recently, which we've used, to help draw in people, people that want to come and experience our learning and development, who come and see our training programs. And again, lots of people mention that. A lot of people mention our IIP Platinum. Obviously, that's a huge accreditation that we have. And a lot of people mention that. That's mentioned pretty much, I would say, almost every call, if not, everyone mentions, I can see that you invest in people, you're platinum, that's amazing. Obviously, UK employer, best UK employer, we obviously shout about loads, it's something we're really proud of. And I think it really sort of demonstrates that we do put people first, and we want to invest in, listening to them. We want to know what they want, and then we want to help sort of achieve that with them and support them on their journey and their career as well.
That's interesting. So going back, I think, to the kind of thread underlining this conversation somewhat is about sort of intergenerational differences. I think it may be worth just quickly going through and saying what the kind of generations mean at the moment. Largely, we've baby boomers have, I think the youngest baby boomers are about 65 now, so they're basically out of the main workforce. I think the youngest Gen Xers are something like 42, 41. Is that right?
Yes, about that, because then millennials come in at about that point as well. Where you look, there's no kind of agreed dates for the generations. Each sort of academic will have slightly different dates, but
I tend to go with the Pew Institute just because at least there's someone who's decided.
That is who I use in my research too.
Yeah, so just to finish that off, so the youngest millennials are about 27, I think. Is that right? So
about that, and then it's Gen Z.
Yes, yeah. So they're the kind of areas that we're talking about here. So I'm interested then to try and unpack, this very kind of, you've obviously got a defined culture. You've got a culture that you're very proud of, that's won you awards and sounds, incredible, certainly to me. What though is the, do you find a difference with generation that it appeals to some and not others, or what's the effect of generation on that question?
Yeah, I think for us, what we know is that, again, generational or not, people that have different expectations, they want different things. So it's making sure that we cater to all sorts of different needs, motivations, by providing that sort of whole range of things, like competitive commission, the best commission of all the South Coast agencies, but also the opportunities to learn and develop, but also the well-being, the flexible working, hybrid working. We kind of make sure that we appeal to everybody, and people dip in and out of different things. So we might find that maybe Gen X people prefer to use the work from home more so than Gen Z people who want to be in the office and around and more social and collaborative, particularly where they're sort of earlier on in their career, they tend to not work from home, and maybe they've got less commitments outside of work. They might not have families that they're sort of providing for, and therefore it's less important for them to be able to work from home and have that flexible working. So I think that kind of comes into it in some ways. Differences in that respect. But yeah, generally speaking, I would say that we do just try and cater the best we can for everybody. Obviously, we do also understand that we can't do everything for everyone, and that's difficult for me. I must admit, it's not something I don't like. The thought of someone not liking something or not being happy, but you have to do the greater good for the majority of people, essentially. So making sure that we are, able to offer flexibility, but making sure it's still right for us as a business. For example, obviously there's a lot of businesses talking around unlimited holiday, for example, and it has been mentioned a few times at Carrington West, but actually personally for me it's not something that I would want to offer here, and that's not because I don't want people to take holidays. It's actually the opposite reason. Research shows that a lot of people don't take as much leave once it's unlimited, and I think particularly for us, where we do have a lot of Gen Z people that are new to working, this is their first career at university, college, apprentices, they probably don't have those an understanding of the boundaries around holiday and what they can and can't take. And for me, my concern would be people wouldn't take enough holiday or take enough time off. Recruitment is a stressful environment. It's highly pressured. That time off's really important. So we make sure that we have generous holiday allowance rather than kind of going for that unlimited. So yes, there might be people here that are frustrated that we don't offer unlimited. We've got the right intent by not offering it. And it's about building that trust with our employees so that they understand why we do the things that we do, and why we sort of build our culture around what's the best for everybody, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really interesting. I mean, the conversation about trust came up with James, over and over again, and the importance of that. And I totally agree. I think there's another kind of thing that you've kind of alluded to. Those studies around unlimited holiday. The thing that I sort of find very interesting about it, I think, is the general consensus that I've seen is because, as you say, you don't know what the boundaries are anymore. You don't have expectations. If you say you've got, UK minimum is 28 days, including bank holidays, you've got 28 days, therefore go use them. And you've got like a little, tick, and it's never enough, obviously. So, you're getting to the end of the year, and you go, I wish I had 3 more days holiday. And then you want holiday buybacks and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we do holiday buys, so people can buy more days if they want, and that's available all year round as well, for that very reason. So at the beginning of the year, you might think, no, I've got plenty of holiday, but actually it goes very quickly.
It does. It normally goes within a month, doesn't it? And you're like, my mum's asked when I want to go. Yeah, yes, okay, yes, mum, I'll go on holiday with you. And then the next one comes along, you're like, I've only got 4 days left.
It does. It runs away with you, doesn't it?
It does.
But that's really important, because we do also have other people that don't use their holidays, so we really have to encourage them to use it to make sure that they do use it. Because, like I said, it is important that people do take that holiday. But yeah, obviously, I know it absolutely works for some organisations, but just for us, and looking at the research, my concern would be that, like I said, those sort of new people to the workforce might not feel comfortable setting those boundaries for themselves, and by setting that boundary with the 25 days holiday plus bank holidays or whatever it might be, you're sort of allowing them to then use that, if that makes sense. It's okay for them to take those days because that's what you can have.
And I think that's really interesting. That's a conversation we had with David on this podcast a little while ago about these kind of boundaries and expectations, and that actually the modern movement towards sort of employee first thinking when it comes to people and culture is brilliant and powerful, and I think you and I are broad supporters of it. But where it does get interesting is when that expectation starts to be lost and people no longer know what is expected of them. Because the thing that we need to be hyper aware of, I think, here is that at the end of the day, this is still an employment contract. This is still how you get your money to live your life, to pay your rent, to pay for your car and your phone, everything else. So if we aren't respectful of that and the kind of fear of loss that comes with that, then we can end up, really kind of losing something and having those expectations disappear. And I think, as you say there, the younger generations in particular, that's got a big effect for, because they just, they don't have that kind of, knowledge of where the boundaries
to draw on, do they? If they've not kind of been in the environment before, then they don't really know what's right, what's wrong. So yeah, that's just one example of something where you kind of have to meet in the middle there. Of course, I'm sure that there's people here that would love to have unlimited holiday, but unfortunately, like that, and again, we can't please everybody. You have to do what's best, and like I said, make sure that your employees trust your intent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that comes down to communication, right? Like openness and, going back to people. And when they say, I want unlimited holiday, you don't go, go away. You go, it's really interesting, that's been mentioned before. This is why.
It's explaining why that we're not going to move forward with that. So it's making sure that they feel heard still, regardless of whether or not we're going to, we can't do everything that everybody wants. But it's just making sure that you justify that and sort of explain your reasoning why.
Absolutely. So I'm interested now to sort of bring the conversation through, and probably back, within the scope of what you were learning about sort of motivation, multi-generation, etc. Is let's say that we're in this kind of weird situation at the moment where there's been a lot of change. We haven't worked out what's going on. Now, unfortunately, change probably doesn't end today, and therefore there's going to be a load more change. We need to keep up. But let's kind of go with a kind of idea that maybe we've hit a kind of, we've found the solutions to these problems. It's 5 years down the line. We've found the solutions to these problems. What should we be working for? What should that look like? What's the aspiration here?
Yeah, I think for me, if we was to solve all these problems, then the way that the world of work would look for me is more diverse, more inclusive. Like I said, there's differing demands from each of those generational groups, and that will continue as more people enter into the workforce. They're going to have different expectations. I think if we're always understanding what those expectations are, and we're able to sort of build that trust with our employees, and that they understand that we have the right intent with the actions and initiatives that we run, and how we run the business and the culture, then we should be able to meet a diverse set of needs and expectations by creating a culture that allows everybody to get a bit of what they want and be able to build their career in the way that they want. So whether that is the hybrid working, whether that is the opportunity to study for qualifications, it's about understanding what that means to different people. And I think that the big thing we need to make sure we're doing is listening to people.
I think that's, a very, very important thing that has been kind of missing from the world of work for a long time, hasn't it? It's always been, very kind of top down. We know best. I know what my people want. I've heard people genuinely say that. It scares me to this day that I've heard it, but I have. I know what my people want, and therefore, they don't know. They don't know what's good for them. And it's like the fact that idea can exist in the modern workplace is crazy.
Yeah,
absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and it doesn't surprise me either, which is not great.
No, and so I think, we're at risk of going into Wotter and what we do here, I suppose, at this point. But I think it's very interesting around listening. I'm curious to sort of understand your experiences when it comes to listening and what that sort of means, and what you've how you've used listening, I suppose, to tackle those problems.
Yeah, well, I think obviously I've talked a lot about the changing expectations in the workforce and different generations expecting different things. But how can you know what that is unless you ask and listen? So I think, naturally it does come back to things like tools like Wotter that you can use to understand that. But obviously we do it through a whole different sort of multiple channels of seeking feedback and listening, whether that's in sort of one-to-ones between a manager and a team member, whether that's in formal reviews, whether that's it's on Wotter, however that might be. I think sort of speaking to people and listening to them can really shape and build the culture that works for the business, but also meets what your employees and all your people are looking for. So some examples, I guess, for us, going back to COVID again, but during COVID, obviously we were all working from home, and then the expectation changed. So before COVID, we all worked from the office 5 days a week. We didn't do any remote working and home working, but there wasn't any demand for it. There was no expectation around it. But obviously, yeah, that change in circumstances meant that there was an expectation around that. So by sort of consulting with our employees to find out, what we understand that you don't want to be in the office 5 days a week anymore, but what does that actually look like for you? And really getting to understand what their expectations were around that. And that's not to say that, we just did exactly what everyone said, but actually the general consensus was mostly in the office, but the option to work from home if needed, or if that worked better for some people. So now we have the sort of hybrid policy where people can work from home 2 days a week. But actually, we see most people come to the office most of the time anyway. And I think that's kind of testament to the culture that we have here. People like being around each other. Sales is a tough role. I can imagine it's even tougher sat at home in a room on your own. Whereas if you're here with your team, you can bounce around and, ask for help more easily, or get that support more easily, or provide support and help more easily as well. So, that really shapes that sort of policy for us. People are very happy with that. But we've done it with sort of a multiple of different things as well. So we introduced some flexible benefits recently, and that was, again, it was mentioned in a variety of ways that people would like something in that sort of that remit of having the options pick and choose benefits that suited them. So we really used that feedback, and it completely shaped the benefits that we now offer. I had originally done some research and kind of put together a few of my ideas around what we could offer, but actually feedback changed that completely. There were things that I thought people would want that didn't come up at all. So yeah, it completely changed the way that project went. And if I hadn't asked people their feedback on what they wanted in terms of employee benefits, I could have completely missed the mark for delivering that big project. Obviously, if I had, it paid off massively in terms of actually listening to what people wanted, because it meant that the project was delivered much more successfully.
Absolutely, and one that I always come back to, and I'm so careful when I say this one, but I think it's true. If you think back to a time when you received a gift that you didn't want, particularly from someone that you felt should know you, then and it's a bit wider the mark. Of course, we're polite, nice people, so we say, "Oh, that's brilliant! Thank you so much. I'm really grateful for that. I've always wanted this."
Yeah.
But actually, there is a question: does this person know me as well as I think they know me? And so, if you extrapolate that out on a company-wide basis, and you go and brazenly charge into this project of I'm going to give you all of the things that I know you want, and then you don't get the feedback, actually, the result can be more damaging than doing nothing.
Exactly.
And it's definitely more expensive.
Yeah, exactly. We use the phrase feedback is a gift a lot here. So yeah, we constantly ask what people's thoughts are around whatever it might be, whether it's a training session we've delivered, what did you like, what could we do differently next time? Or is it a whole new employee benefits package that they're looking for? Is it flexible working, dress code, whatever it might be? We make sure that people always have a say in it and put forward their voice, because then we know that we're kind of staying ahead of the curve, and that demands an expectation, and hopefully we can keep meeting needs and help retain our staff, help attract more people. So hopefully in 5 years' time we'll be even bigger. And also people will be more productive, more effective if they're happy and healthy in the workplace. And if we can provide that through things like flexible working or whatever it might be, then it's a win-win situation for everybody.
Yeah, and it changes the kind of relationship with everything, doesn't it? There used to be a one-to-one relationship with desks and people, and now this relationship is no longer sort of necessary. You can have an office that doesn't actually house everyone. It's still quite far-fetched, but it's possible. I'm interested to go back quickly to your kind of hybrid policy with regards to days in and out. Is that a situation where anyone can choose any day that they want, or is there a kind of, how do you ensure that you have team cohesion when, not everyone is in at the same time?
Yeah, so in terms of the way that our policy works, so we have certain sort of, parameters in place in that policy. So things like meetings, if they need to be attended in person, and that takes priority over working from home. Same as training sessions. If we're running a training session, someone's taking the time to put that training together, then that needs to take priority as well. So yeah, there's kind of parameters around that where we ask you to come in, but it is still very flexible in terms of if you want to work from home and your diary allows that to you, then yes, that's fine. And we do monitor it and make sure that there's not times where one person's left in the office on their own. So there is, I guess, an element of trust in that as well, that people are going to use the system appropriately. Not going to end up leaving a new person on their own. So we have to trust that people are going to make sure that they are using it in the right way, essentially, and using it with the right intent. So we talk a lot about intent as well, intent and trust. So the same goes for kind of everything that we do, really. We're trusting our employees to use it and not take advantage of it. So in that respect, we're making sure that people put the accountability on our employees to make sure that they are still making time for their team members and make sure that there's that collaboration there. But I do definitely see that I'd say home work is probably used less and less. People they do value the sort of the connection that they have, the collaboration with their teams. So we do see that people really do come into the office more often than work from home, but they do have that option. If there's a day that they do need to be at home, or it's easier for them to be at home for whatever reason it might be, then they are able to.
No, that's interesting. It just occurred to me, obviously a lot of people bought coffee machines during COVID, and I wonder whether they've now realised that they don't use them as much as they thought they did and sold them on, and therefore it's much better to be in the office because the coffee's better.
Maybe, yeah. We do have 2 coffee machines here, so there's a choice of coffee.
Obviously, that's not the crucial factor here, but it just occurred to me. Look, I think this is really interesting. We've kind of bounced around from kind of sort of larger ideas, particularly with intergenerational sort of areas. We've moved into kind of operations, how to actually deploy it. So I think is really interesting because most of these conversations are kind of big picture things, and so to really kind of come into this is how this thing works is really, really interesting. I think I just want to kind of finish with one, I suppose, sort of final question, just to sort of dig back in. What does utopia look like? Like, what should we be trying to achieve? And what's the benefit, I suppose? Because we said this over and over again with James, and it's an undercurrent here that this is hard. Like, doing this is hard, it's complex, it's always changing, people are annoying, I mean, we're humans, right? Like, we all want different things, and it's frustrating sometimes to try and find that balance and make it work. What's the reason? Why do we do it?
Yeah, I guess it's maybe a bit cliche to say, but all I really want is people feeling happy and excited to come to work each day. I really hate the thought of anybody dreading coming to work, or having negative feelings about working and coming to work. And for me, it's people are they're excited to come in, they're excited to see what they can achieve here, they're excited to see where their career is going to go with us. So it's that really sort of happy, healthy well-being is a big thing for me as well. I think, as an employer, we can't take responsibility for well-being, but if we can sort of encourage and empower people to be healthy and look after themselves, then that's fantastic. But yeah, all I'm really looking for is people enjoying their roles, because it means they're going to be happier in their their outside life, the life outside of work, in their personal lives, and that's going to make them happier and more productive in the workplace too. They're going to have more success, and that it's just kind of like a cycle. If we keep people happy, healthy, engaged, they're going to do better. They're going to feel more successful, more sense of achievement. They're going to be happier and healthier. It kind of just keeps going round and round. That makes it sound so straightforward and easy, doesn't it? But obviously, it's a massive challenge. And for us, we're a real scale-up business. We've grown massively over the last few years. That's going to continue growing. So that provides a real challenge for us. In order to kind of keep that culture and keep that level of engagement across the workforce is going to be a huge challenge for us over the next few years. But for me, that's the ultimate goal. And there's various different routes to that. But yeah, ultimately, people being happy, excited, wanting to be here, being excited about their future in work, but also outside of work too.
That's brilliant. I think that summed it up better than I ever could. Look, I'm really, really grateful. That's it. That's the solution, isn't it? Just rainbows, bit of fairy dust. We're all good. We're all good. And 2 coffee machines.
2 coffee machines, yeah.
Vital to all successful businesses. At least 2, I think we should point out.
Yeah.
If a company with 5,000 staff turns around and goes, yeah, I've got 2 coffee machines.
Yeah.
Might need to be next. Anyway, let's not get bogged down by coffee machines. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us today, Emily. And I think that sort of vision of happiness and engagement and fulfillment that can spread out not only through our personal lives and our own careers and the long trajectories that they take, but also into our personal lives. Do we go home at the end of the day feeling like we have done good and that we are cared for, we are looked after? I think that's really powerful.
Definitely.
So yeah, super grateful for your time today, Emily. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem at all. Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. Cheers.
See you later.